The following program was funded in part by Toyota, AT&T, Baldwin Richardson Foods, Lincoln Financial Group, Apple, American Airlines. A complete list is available at thehistorymakers.org. Born in the South of a loving family, her legal career propelled her from general counsel to the head of the nation's largest black media empire. Smart, a team player, she rose where few black women have risen. Her name, Debra Lee. And the History Makers is proud to present An Evening with Debra Lee, featuring Eric Benet, Shaka Khan, Ray Chu and his singers, and now to our host, Miss Debra Roberts.
Good evening. I'm Debra Roberts, and I am honored and thrilled to be here tonight to celebrate an extraordinary woman. Her name is Debra Lee, and tonight we salute her.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Everybody wants to rise above without a touch of dignity, without a stroke of love. You take a little time, check yourself to live the life you're praying for. Just be true to yourself, 'cause everybody wants to be your friend. If you got a dime to lend, never really matters in the end to them. That's why I'm true to myself, y'all. I'm true to my family, in love with a true integrity. Yeah, yeah. I'm true to myself, y'all. I'm true to my God above, in love with a true integrity. Everybody wants a piece of you and me, to be the victim of that greed or codependency. And it's so very hard to know which way to go. A lie can be the gospel truth if eloquently told. Yeah, 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 baby. If they can see another win, oh, well, yeah. I'm true to myself, y'all. I'm true to my family, in love with a true integrity. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm true to myself, y'all. I'm true to my God above, in love with a true integrity. Come on, y'all. Some people live their whole lives and they'll never see the only way to find true happiness is to thine own self be. I'm true to myself, y'all. I'm true to my little baby girls, and all I wanna do, well, is be true to myself, yeah. Now, I'm true to myself, y'all. I'm true to the man above. I wanna be true, true. So true, yeah. Come on, man. I got to be true to myself. True to myself, yeah. Gonna be true, yeah. Yo, Ray, why don't you break it down? Break it down. True to come on, y'all. If you wanna be true to your family, live your life the way you're supposed to live, girl. True to myself, y'all. Never believe. I know y'all dressed so nice, but come on. True to yourself, be true, yeah, yeah. True, yeah. True to you gotta be. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Debra Lee to the stage tonight. Wow, Eric Benet, Ray Chu, and the Chu Singers and the band. Is this the way you always walk out on stage?
Yes, pretty much.
This is really exciting.
Yeah, no, thank you for being here. I'm really honored.
So thrilled to
and
be
thank
here.
all of you all.
And we're here in your new home, LA,
Yes.
which is not so new because you've gone back and forth. So many of us associate you with the East Coast.
Yes.
North Carolina, Washington, D.C., New York. What is it about LA that just grabs at your heart?
My two children.
Oh, that'll do it.
Their names are Quinn and Ava. Hi, guys. You know, I've always loved LA, though. When my dad was in the Army, we moved around a lot, and then we moved to Greensboro, North Carolina. So I always had a fond place in my heart for LA. I love the weather, I love the sunshine. And then both my daughter came to USC and stayed, and my son followed her, and so I followed both of them.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
fortunately for those of us on the East Coast, we do get to see you from time to time.
That's right. I still go back and forth between here and New York a lot.
Well, you and I have known each other a little while. Full disclosure, we're friends.
Yes, we are.
And I have to say, I always thought that I knew you fairly well, but until I began digging, like the journalist that I am,
Yeah.
I discovered so much more about you and
Yeah.
about your life and about your childhood. And fortunately for us, your sister, your big sister, Greta Lee, filled in some of the blanks. Take a look.
We were very much a Dick and Jane family. You know, it's very traditional. Richard McClish Lee was our father, and Delma Louise Lee was our mother. They met in a legendary story where my mother was working in Boston as a Rosie the Riveter. And she met my father, who was a dashing young lieutenant. As a young family, we were stationed in Japan, and another legend in the family is that Debbie was brought about on the slow boat trip home from Japan.
My mom has an older sister and an older brother. She did grow up in a lot of different places. Her father was in the military, but she considers Greensboro, North Carolina to be her home base.
Greensboro was and still is a small town and a very close-knit African-American community. Everyone knew each other, and word spread quickly that a new girl was going to be joining our 6th grade elementary school class.
So her first day in Greensboro, Debbie came home and we said, well, how was your day? What was it like? She said, well, we had an election for president. Oh, that's nice. Who did they elect the president? She said, me. We were like, you? They don't know you. It's your first day. You've never met these people before. And that was the first signal that she had real leadership ability. Some young women came down from Brown University to Dudley High School, and they had perfect afros, and they were sharp and intelligent, and she said, that's it, I'm going to Brown.
She was always curious about studying culture, and she majored in, Chinese political science when she was at Brown. So I think she's always just had an interest in culture and different types of people.
She did very well at Brown, and then she started applying to different law schools. I remember we were like beyond happy when she got into Harvard.
It's real, that's a fact. It's a fact. I know my love, it won't bend and date. This love's good and it won't ever wait. 'Cause my love is your choice. In age and it'll never destroy. 'Cause my love is so sad. It'll never age, it'll never age, never age, never age. It's a as we grow old, it's never that all this love in here is for you, and that's a fact. We all know that she's so beautiful. It'll never, 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 never go. 'Cause your love and my love is something that angel time will never destroy. And your love is so sad. He'll never, never, time never, never, never destroy it.
I forgot to warn you that we have a few musical interludes from time to time to tell your story.
I'll tell you a quick story. When I first got to Greensboro, I had to learn how to slow dance.
Oh.
They didn't slow dance in LA. And I think this was the first record I ever slow danced to, so it has a special place in my heart.
Music was very big in your household, and definitely
Yes.
with you, though, right? You
Yes.
remember a lot of life through music.
Yeah, I do. Both of my parents were big jazz enthusiasts. My father had a cousin named Willie Smith, who was a trumpet player. And my mother roommate was a college roommate of Dinah Washington.
Oh.
So I grew up with that in the household all the time. And then when I moved to Greensboro, you know, we had a little small apartment, and I had a teeny room, but I had a small record player.
Oh.
And it was
78s?
always filled, no, 45s.
Oh.
Yeah, 45s.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, I'm not that old. And,
No, you
but,
are not.
Yeah, well, thank you. But, and, you know, I was always playing the Supremes and the Temptations, and I always said the Supremes showed me what was possible.
Well, we talk about Greensboro, and of course that shaped so much of your life, and I want to talk about that because you grew up in a segregated system, as did I.
Right.
4th grade for me, high school for you, when you integrated. But before you moved there, you were in LA for a short time, and you
Right.
said that's where your racial awakening came.
We lived through the Watts riots and watched, you know, protesters burn down stores on Compton Boulevard, which wasn't that far from my house. So when I moved to Greensboro, I was drawing pictures for art, and I would draw pictures of buildings, you know, with flames coming out of them. They had signs in the window that said black owned or colored owned because the black businesses were trying to save their businesses by letting the protesters know who owned the shops. But that's when it all started for me. And then when I moved to Greensboro, it was even more of an issue because Greensboro was very segregated.
Very segregated, the black side of town and the white side of town.
And it was divided by Market Street. And the schools were, I went to all black elementary school, all black junior high, all, you know, high school. But on our side of town, we had a black bank, we had black doctors, we had black lawyers. So we didn't feel like we wanted for anything. We didn't feel like, you know, there was something wrong with living in our part of town. I lived in a very nice development for housing called Bimbo Park. And I found out years later that this white developer had taken a risk by buying, you know, building these middle class to upper middle class homes for black families. You know, that's where I developed my sense of identity and my racial sense of identity.
Did you feel the sting of Jim Crow?
Not often. Like I said, you know, we were proud of our schools. We knew all the famous alums that had gone to our school. I didn't know about Clarence Avant yet. I learned about him later on. You know, it was a proud community. And I remember my father was one of the parents who sued the school system to integrate because he was friendly with Dr. George Simpkins, who was head of the NAACP. And while he was suing the school system, my friends and I were having Save the Black School protests.
So you're protesting to keep the schools segregated, and he wants to integrate for you.
Because we thought if they just gave us the resources we needed, that it would be fine. We liked our school, we liked our band, we liked our teachers, and we were encouraged to be the best we could be.
And you were in high school too, so you were ready to sort of move on in your life as it was.
Yeah.
You talked about how your father was the one who always pushed, and he knew that this was going to give you an opportunity.
Yes, and he had gone, he was born, his family is from Charleston, South Carolina. They moved to Washington, D.C. for more opportunities. And he went to Dunbar, and his two sisters went to Dunbar. And in the 40s and 50s, Dunbar was, you know, the elite of black teachers and black students. So he knew what education meant. His sister actually went to, and my aunt actually went to Mount Holyoke in like the 40s. She was one of 2 or 3 black students at Mount Holyoke. So he was a pusher, you know, and I was the baby of the family, and I think he pushed me harder than anyone else because he wanted me to be a lawyer, he wanted me to go to an Ivy League school.
And he was the reason you wound up at Brown. You looked at a number of schools, but then you went to Brown because of your father, sort of knowing that you had it in you. But what was that like for you going from the segregated South and being very proud, of course, and very rooted in a good education, but now to go to Brown in the Northeast?
It was unusual. Not many people left Greensboro to go to Providence, Rhode Island, because North Carolina had so many great schools. When I got there, I felt that I was ready for it. I felt I had a good background. You know, a little bit of intimidation when I saw these, you know, white students walking around with computer printouts. Remember when they were that big? But I quickly found my footing, and I found a community at Brown. I met my college roommate the first day on campus. She's here tonight, Michelle Boren, and we had a lot in common. And we became friends the first day of Brown.
And a lot of you stuck together, and you sort of, you know, held a real community there.
Right.
And so
we sat together in the cafeteria. We wouldn't bus our trays because we figured after 200 years of slavery.
You just left your trays there for somebody else to pick up?
There, and then they piled up. And the crazy part was that most of the black students worked in the cafeteria, so we were just.
So they had to go and bust your trays, and you're like, this somehow wasn't what you had in mind.
But it seemed like the right thing to do in the early 70s. I mean, that was our protest. But I immediately found a community and felt a part of it.
And then you began looking at law schools. You looked in California. You were sort of thinking about that, but then you wound up at Harvard.
Right.
And let's talk about that, because Harvard Law School, and you were sort of not sure that you really wanted to do it. Your dad wanted you to go.
He didn't know I applied.
Oh, right.
Right. Well,
but you knew he would want you to go.
Right. That's why I didn't tell him I applied. I wanted to make the decision myself, but I had a boyfriend at UCLA, so I applied to 3 California law schools, and then Columbia and Georgetown, just to make it look good. And I went to see my dean one day, and he said, you really should apply to Harvard and Yale. And I remember leaving his office in tears. Because I knew if I applied and I got in, and I got accepted, my dad would make me go.
Well, Harvard Law School opened up a whole world of opportunities for you. Let's take a look.
It's 1976. We were 22 years old, and we were fortunate enough to get accepted at Harvard Law School. So we had a class of somewhere between 50 and 60 African Americans there. And Debra always looked at the law as a vehicle of change. And I think that's why the second year she went to the Kennedy School. She had hoped to one day go into government. Now, as history has shown, I think Debra only had one government job. That was a very prestigious law clerk with Barrington Parker, a federal district court judge. And that's opened her way up to going to Steptoe and Johnson.
I met Debra in about 1981, maybe 82. I was a new partner at Steptoe & Johnson, and she was a summer associate. And on a summer associate event on Chesapeake Bay with a bunch of youngsters, including Debra, and the guy in charge of the boat told us, you probably don't want to jump into the bay because there are real large jellyfish out there this time of year. Well, Debra just went and into the water. And I said, hell, this lady's not only smart, she's really fearless.
So Debbie and I were a part of a rather small group of black lawyers who went to big law firms after graduation from law school. And Debbie's a couple years ahead of me in school, and so I've always looked up to her and respected her. And she always made room for those of us who were coming a little bit behind to open the door wider and make sure that there was room for more than just one at the table.
Debra and I came up at a time when communications law was burgeoning, so we had this whole era of black-owned cable television companies and broadcasters, and they needed lawyers.
And one of my first clients was Black Entertainment Television when I got to Steptoe & Johnson. And Debra basically was my resource associate on all of that activity. And she's shown at it.
Just looking at her educational background, Brown University, Harvard Law School, the Kennedy School for a master's degree, I knew I was talking to somebody who was gonna be somebody.
We should have brought some tissues out.
I know, I have them.
You brought your Kleenex out to hear Vernon Jordan talk about you in that way. You actually pursued a dual degree program, master's from Harvard's Kennedy School of Government and a law degree from Harvard, even though at the time you didn't love Boston.
Right.
And you didn't really want to stay that long, but this extended you. Why?
Because I hated law school. Thomas was very nice in his comments to say, I just wanted to go to Kennedy School. I wanted to save my law degree, and I hated it so much. I said, well, if I go to Kennedy School, that may give me more alternatives.
Well, it was very intense, right? The law school.
And it was very intense. But the thing that really disappointed me about Harvard Law School was that my role models were Thurgood Marshall and Constance Baker Motley, and people that had changed the world through the law. And by the time I got to Harvard Law in school in 1976, none of the professors wanted to talk about changing the world. They didn't want to talk about policy. They didn't care. All they wanted to talk about was black letter law and go read the cases, see what the judges said, and come back and, recite it. And I didn't want to go to a law firm, and I didn't want to go into business, and I said, the Kennedy School is my way out. And so actually that extra year saved my 3 years of law school.
Now, you weren't just all study and no play because you got married during this period.
Yes. I was dating a student at Harvard Medical School named Ernie Carter, and we got married.
But it was a short-lived marriage. Do you think you were too young?
Definitely. I got married when we were both 26. He was in a very intense program, and I clerked for Barrington Parker, which was like law school one-on-one. His feeling was that you made clerkship like boot camp, and that would make you stronger. And I was his first black female clerk, and I think he was harder on me because of that. So Ernie was having his experience, I was having mine, and yeah, the marriage didn't last.
And then you actually move on with law, something that you weren't that thrilled about, and you go to Steptoe & Johnson along the way. And your dad was very proud.
He was very proud. He didn't know law firms like Steptoe & Johnson even existed. So when he would come visit me and he'd see the wood paneling and the chandeliers, he's like, oh, my daughter made it. She can support herself.
All that pushing paid off.
Right, all that pushing paid off. But I was miserable. And the only reason I went to a law firm is because during my clerkship, Ronald Reagan won. And I had originally intended to go to the Securities and Exchange Commission in their policy office, but after Reagan won, he put a hiring freeze on, and I didn't want to go into a Reagan administration. And so I went to Steptoe to hide out until the Democrats came back. People already know the end of the story. That took 12 years. And so I was at Steptoe much longer than I expected. After about 5 years, I was like, either I buckle down and try to make partner, which I never really wanted to do, or it was time to leave. And that's when I started looking around.
But you were always sort of conflicted because even though you were a serious student and a serious business person, lawyer, there was a part of you that also wanted creativity, and you wanted things that were a little more interesting and entertainment and all of that.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, I always kind of blamed it on my parents. My father is very strict, and it's all about education and being the smartest you can be. And my mother was very creative. You know, she sewed, she did needlework, so she was the creative one, and she's very talented. So I had both sides of that in me. So when I applied to law school, from Brown, I actually applied to art schools too. And then I told my father I wanted to take a year off and decide what I really wanted to do. And he said, if you do that, I will not pay for law school. So I've always been pretty good with numbers, so I said, okay, law school,
Law
here I come.
school is the way to go.
So it's always been a part of my life trying to balance both of those things.
But also that theme of sort of charting your own course,
Yes.
because then you at some point have lunch with BET founder Bob Johnson, and he starts talking to you about coming aboard. Let's take a look.
Bob Johnson is the president of Black Entertainment Television. Bob, welcome very much to Conversations. Tell us, Black Entertainment Television, what's it about for the cable television audience?
Black Entertainment Television is the nation's first and only cable television satellite network distributing black programming on an advertising-supported basis to about 4.5 million cable households across the nation.
Quality program.
Bob Johnson started Black Entertainment Television in 1981. It so happened that that occurred at the same time that a new phenomenon hit the medium, and that phenomenon was musical programming.
Now DJ runs my name. Jam Master Jam is his. Well, he's DMC. It's like, and that's the way.
Black Entertainment Television, along with MTV, became the principal carriers of that kind of programming, and they didn't have to pay for it. So it enabled them to grow their audiences without having to do a lot of original programming. That was very important.
Immortal, musical genius. All these labels have been affixed to Stevie Wonder. Included on the new album are a few tunes that I'm sure will become classics. Here's just one of them. This is Gone Home Girl, Stevie Wonder.
Long days, short nights when you're on the road.
The early days of BET was very exciting because we were a very entrepreneurial company with entrepreneurial spirit. Everybody sort of did some of everything.
The interesting challenge that she was facing was there were not a lot of people with her job. There were not a lot of independent cable networks. She had to really build the legal department, create contracts, and create essentially new paradigms for how to operate in this marketplace.
So the amazing thing about Black Entertainment Television was that you had a group of young black people who had never had an opportunity to work in, much less oversee, manage a company that was about to be listed on the New York Stock Exchange, do just that.
We were the first black media company to go public. It was a great time and a challenging time for us because we were sort of learning as we go. And Debra was, right in the mix of that, right by Bob's side. So she was really integral and really guiding us through our growth period.
Love has truly been good to me. Not even one sad day or minute have I had since you come away. I hope You know I'd gladly go anywhere you take me. It's so amazing to be loved. I'd follow you to the moon in the sky above. Oh, ooh, I'd go. Got to tell you how you thrill me. I'm happy as I can be. You have come and changed my whole world. Bye-bye, sadness. Hello, mellow. And what a wonderful day. It's so amazing to be loved. I follow you to the moon in the sky above. Oh, ooh, I'd go. And it's so amazing, amazing. I could stay forever, forever. Here in love and leave you, no never. 'Cause we've got amazing love. Truly it's amazing, amazing. Love brought us together, together. I would never leave you, no never. 'Cause we got amazing love. Oh, so amazing. I've been waiting for a love like you. It's so amazing to be loved. I follow you to the moon in the sky above. Oh, it's so amazing to be loved. Hey, to the moon in the sky above. So amazing. I'd follow you to the moon and the sky above. It's so amazing to be loved. I follow you to the moon in the sky above.
I'm going to start hanging out with you more often, and R&B music just kind of follows you around. We heard so much there about the beginnings of BET, and I have to say, Debra, here you are at this well-established, respected law firm. And now this is kind of like the wild, wild west of cable TV in a way, because nobody had really seen anything like this. No. And you leave that job to start here.
Yes.
What were you thinking?
Yeah, a lot of people ask me that. What was I thinking? Especially my father. He wasn't really happy about it.
Because it's cable.
Right. So no one in Washington, D.C. knew what BET was. And as Ty Brown said, I had been working on BET Matters for several years, but no one in DC knew what it was. The partners at Steptoe barely knew what it was. So the first person I told was my father, and he was like, well, why would you leave Steptoe and Johnson to go to a company no one's heard of? And I said, well, you know, Steptoe just isn't fun anymore. And my dad looked me straight in the eyes and he said, if it was supposed to be fun, they wouldn't call it work.
Pragmatic, as always.
You know, this is from a man who spent 25 years in the Army, so that makes sense. He never had fun. He was supporting his family. I decided to go. The partners were not used to associates leaving to go work for companies. There weren't that many companies in DC. Most people went to government for a couple of years and then came back. There was a revolving door. So yeah, a lot of people thought it was a little crazy. And when I first got to BET, I thought that I might be a little crazy.
What did I get myself into?
To go from a 200-person law firm where everyone thought in terms of the law and legal issues to go to a 80-person company and to be the only lawyer there. It was like I was whistling in the desert. No one cared about what I said.
And your budget wasn't very huge.
No, I remember exactly what it was. $100,000. Bob paid me $50,000, and I had to use the rest for outside counsel, for travel, and for books.
Wow.
So you know that made an impact on me because that was over 32 years ago, and I still remember it like it was yesterday. So bottom line, I could not afford outside counsel. I mean, that's what it was, because I had to travel, I needed a few books.
So what did you do, depend on the kindness of friends?
Yes. People like Tony Cook and other people, a few other general counsels I knew in DC, I'd get together with them once a month and get legal advice for free. And pray a lot at night that no one would sue us, because I knew deep in my heart that one good lawsuit would put us out of business. So it was very stressful, and I was the only attorney. And the first thing Bob did when I started at BET was say, no one can sign any contracts unless Debra read them. And so that didn't make me very popular.
This new woman has come to town, and now she's like making everything difficult.
I think when I joined BET, cable operators weren't even paying us per sub. I remember when Bob Johnson decided to start charging 3 cents per subscriber, and that was a big deal. So the company had just gone into the black, so it was making money, but it was very small, one office in DC and one attorney.
And then Bob had all these great ambitions, and every time something would come up, you were in charge. You were supervising construction of a new studio facility. You even started a teen magazine along the way, and you got married.
I got married again. Fell in love and had 2 children. And I had just returned from maternity leave with my son.
Was there a maternity policy at the time?
I had to write it.
You had to write it?
I had to write it.
And I hope you wrote it for 6 months off.
I wrote it for 3 months, which was pretty liberal at the time, but no female executive at BET had ever, gone out on maternity leave. So I had to write it, I had to negotiate it with Bob.
And you were also, even though you were off for 3 months, you were basically working from home because you had all this responsibility.
I know.
And then you're a woman too who is blazing this trail. Did you ever feel that kind of imposter syndrome that some women feel, where you kind of wonder, am I in over my head? Do I know what I'm doing? Oh my gosh, I'm representing so many people by going out here doing this?
Sometimes. When I was appointed as COO, race wasn't an issue because I was working at a black company. But all of a sudden people were like, wow, I never thought a woman would get this job. So all of a sudden it became really clear that being female was the issue. And then when I got married and had kids, as you said, I took 3 months off, but I was working the whole time. There was not another lawyer at BET for me to push anything off on. So my poor son, I thought sometime I would smother him while I was breastfeeding on conference calls. And going to BMI, I was negotiating with them, and they insisted that I come up to New York 6 weeks after my son was born. And I remember going in the bathroom, there were 10 guys in the conference room waiting for me, and I had to go in the bathroom and pump my breasts because they were hard as, it was the first time I had been away from my son. So it was a learning experience.
But those early days were really difficult, I'm guessing.
Right. Well, it was hard early on because I started doing more business things. And as you said, I oversaw the construction of our first studio. I came back from maternity leave and was given the assignment of running 3 magazines. So I was trying to balance it all, and I decided I liked the magazines and business better because it was more creative. And so for many years, I tried to get rid of the general counsel title. So I was ending up doing 3 or 4 different jobs just to do what I wanted to do. And eventually, Bob's strategy was to make me COO, so then I was responsible for everything.
Were you enjoying it, or were you stressed most of the time?
I enjoyed it. We were building this company. We've been the first black company to go public. That was exciting. And we were stretching the boundaries of the brand as much as we could. We had a clothing line, we had a film business, we were trying to open casinos. I loved the magazines, and that business was growing. So I enjoyed it, but it got to a point where it was too much.
Did you get a gut feeling for the kinds of things that would work, the business ventures that would work and what would flop?
We had a lot of flops. What I did learn was that in business, when something flops, people just move on, especially men. They just move on. They're like, oh, well, let's write that off. I was like, oh, is that how that works? I would feel bad. Like one of the magazines, I had to close it down. I felt horrible, and I would just write it off. So I think I did have a gut feeling for what would work and what didn't. I remember one time, about 3 of us took a trip to Atlanta because Bob had a friend who wanted to start BET Electricity with Southern Power. I was like, I don't don't think that's going to work. I don't think people want electricity from BET. So we tried a lot of different things, and it was exciting.
And you were public from 1991 to 1999, but then the decision is made to go private.
Yes.
This was a big step.
Yeah, I wasn't really worried about it. John Malone was on our board, and he convinced Bob Johnson that going private would give us the flexibility to get into the new businesses we wanted to get into. Like, they were sure the street wouldn't like casinos, and they didn't like movies. It was kind of exciting to be able to get out from under being public. We got a good price for the shareholders, and I ended up being one of the 3 owners, so that was fun.
That was pretty fun.
Yeah.
As the business is actually starting to look more attractive to people as a business, Sumner Redstone takes note, and he comes calling. He's interested in buying BET, and you reach a historical deal. Let's take a look.
Please join with me in giving a standing ovation to the new CEO and soon-to-be chairman and CEO, my friend and colleague of over 20 years, Ms. Debra Lee.
I think Debra had always had this view that BET could do more and be more than it was. But keep in mind that we had just sold ourselves to Viacom. So Debra also had to navigate leading a company through a process where we had completely new owners.
Debbie took over at BET at a time of controversy.
You know, videos kind of got outrageous. People start saying, why do you play those videos? And they protested in front of their house.
That period of time was definitely stressful and took a toll on my mother, but I think, you know, she knew that what she was doing was important enough to keep pushing through.
It was almost a little ironic that people were kind of coming at that time when, you know, the shifts of change had already started.
She changed the trajectory of BET, and she started projecting shows that saw the humanity in us.
Debra was the executive who ultimately greenlit the game. It was a huge risk for BET at the time. It was part of the success that began ushering in the wave of scripted content to the cable industry overall.
She really took a step with being Mary Jane. I know one of the things Debra was most proud of was the New Edition story. She has a long line of scripted programming that did amazing and actually put BET on another level.
BET, that's all you need to say. It speaks for itself. It's a community, you know.
She gave us a platform for us to bring our content and believe that we can, you know, also be a part of television as directors, as producers, and you can see the industry that was built off of the seeds that she planted.
BET's legacy, in my opinion, has been the opportunity that the brand has given people of color that the industry didn't give people of color. Debra understood that that was very important.
She really showed corporate America that a talented, smart woman could lead a major company, and doing it with other smart minorities.
She's been the glue that kind of kept BET together for all these years, and I'm really proud of her because she shows what a woman can do if she's given the chance.
She never ever lost sight of the fact that there was a way to meld entertainment with the social causes that she thought were so important.
She definitely had a powerful message she wanted to convey to young Black girls as well, so that's where programming like Black Girls Rock.
I always look forward to watching the Black Girls Rock Awards. It's such a special night of tribute and recognition of us.
Shows like the BET Honors that showed these influential people in our community.
I want to thank BET and Debra Lee for this most cherished honor. Debra is a leader in this nation. I cherish our friendship.
I love the way Debra Lee is empowering women. She has a leading women's defined conference that she does. You walk away feeling really good about yourself and feeling like you can go out and change the world.
So I think she is an example of what people can do in their lives if they're open to other possibilities, if they're willing to take risks, if they're willing to step outside of some seemingly predetermined or ordained path along the way.
Whatever it is, when God leaves a hand on the shoulder a little bit longer than other people, Deborah's got it.
This was not easy. I mean, for a black media company to be acquired by a mainstream company, I mean, it's huge, but a lot of people didn't like this.
A lot of people in the black community thought that it was a sellout, that Bob had sold out, that Viacom was going to run the company. Even though when Bob and I met with Sumner Redstone and Mel Karmazin, one of the things we asked for and they agreed to is that we would keep the management team in place and that they wouldn't get involved in programming. And that was really important because we wanted it to still represent the black community.
But you sort of became the face of sort of like this hip hop, crass kind of video, and people really saw you as sort of perpetuating that, didn't they?
People during my 13 years as CEO of BET, they saw the change in programming, and we began to invest more in programming as we got rid of all these other businesses, and people appreciate the change.
People don't ask men this, so forgive me for asking this, but, and I don't want to say balance, because I don't really think there is a balance to life. I think we sort of navigate it. But how was that for you as this woman? There weren't that many women in the C-suite, so number one, it's kind of a slightly lonely world, and you're a mom, and you're, you know, navigating this world, this very, very busy and burgeoning world of BET.
Yeah. It was difficult at times. A lot of times, you know, I asked the kids, you know, I can retire and stay at home. And they're like, no, we like what you do. Keep doing it. So I would check in to make sure they were all right. But they have a very close relationship with their dad, and he was a big help. It is a challenge for women, especially women that don't have the resources.
Right.
And there is no balance.
Right.
That's
why I don't use that word balance.
Right.
There is no balance.
I heard Valerie Jarrett say this once. She said, different parts of your life. She said she couldn't do the White House when her daughter was young. And so you find what works for you at that particular time.
There were a lot of things that you put your stamp on, a lot of the programming issues. And I remember specifically when Being Mary Jane came on and you were so excited and you sent out email blasts to all of your friends talking about the game, which also was very successful. What other kinds of things were you proudest of that you had to do with the content?
Yeah, well, the game was the first big Super Bowl-like event we had because, you know, we expected 2 to 3 million viewers or hoped for 2 to 3 million viewers. This was a show that had been off at the CW for 2 years. And the night it aired, we got 7.7 million viewers, which set a record in the cable industry. We felt like we had won the Super Bowl. We proved that if you put on quality black programming, the audience will show up. I got flowers from Tyler Perry. Jonathan Rogers, who was running TV One, called me. And they were all so happy because we had proven the point.
If you create it, they will come.
Right. And quality. That's the thing that our audience wanted. So that was the beginning, and Being Mary Jane followed shortly thereafter. I was very excited about Being Mary Jane because it was about a single, working, professional woman newscaster who had issues with her family, she had issues with men, she had issues with her friends, and I thought it was the first time on TV you saw this full profile of a black woman as a human being and what we deal with. Black Girls Rock was especially exciting for me. BET Honors, the Soul Train Awards, when we bought Soul Train. I know Clarence Avant called me years ago and he said, Deborah, you should buy Soul Train. And Clarence was always right. It was the thing to buy. And those are people that inspired me when I was young. It's really been quite a great career that I'm very proud of.
Quite a great career. Well, at the end of 2018, you left Viacom as head of BET. Do you miss the big decisions? Do you call in and say, hey, you should do this?
Not at all. After 32 years being with the company and 13 years as CEO, it was the right time to leave. I'm glad I did it, but I'm glad I'm doing something else now.
What do you want your legacy to be?
You know, I walk through the streets and people come up to me and say, thank you for what you did. Young black men say, thank you for what you've done for the culture. So the fact that people saw the difference and appreciated the change at BET, still warms my heart. I started a conference called Leading Women Defined 11 years ago, and it's just a wonderful conference, and it's 200 prominent African American women. And, I want to help young women and show them that there is a way to be successful.
Deb, this has been such an honor to sit here and talk with you.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for being here. And ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Debra Lee and the wonderfully iconic Chaka Khan is here to take us out in song. Sweet Thing.
To be your friend. If they got a time to lend, never really matters in the end to them. That's why I'm true to myself, y'all. I'm true to my family. In love with the true integrity. Yeah. I'm true to myself, y'all. I'm true to my God above. Love with the true integrity. Now Everybody wants a piece of you and me. To be the victim of that greed or codependency.
For more information or to order your own copy of An Evening with Debra Lee, please visit thehistorymakers.org or call 866-914-1900. That's 866-914-1900. The preceding program was funded in part by Toyota, AT&T, Baldwin Richardson Foods, Lincoln Financial Group, Apple, American Airlines. A complete list is available at thehistorymakers.org.